I'm super, super excited to welcome my dear friend, Hamish Hendry from London. It's so nice to have him on. I met him, I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago in Mysore, not exactly sure when, but we were out on a balcony. And I had the great fortune of just getting an apartment adjacent to his, and we would sit out there and have tea together sometimes after practice and then chat. And it was really super nice for me. It was just like a really good boon. He makes you feel so comfortable. And so my idea with these talks were kind of just to have this dialogue with teachers that I loved and respected. And so to that end, I invited him, and he graciously agreed to be on here and kind of chat and share some questions and insights that we both might have. And so if I'm reading his bio right, which is where I got a little bit of this information, he went to Mysore, India in 95. Is that right, Hamish?
Yep, that's right.
And then I think he got certified 6 years later. It was a little quicker track maybe back then. And then he's been teaching in London for almost 20 years, right? Is that about right? So he really has a great depth of experience, and he has a daughter, and we'll get into a little bit about some of those questions and things like that. But I'm very grateful. I just want to say thank you, Hamish, for coming on.
Thank you.
So let's go ahead and start. I want to know what brought you on the mat in the first few years, and what keeps you on the mat now, and also, like, I know that you had a child, and did your practice change at all? You know, what was like that transition between like now and then, or are they the same motivations for your practice as you had back then?
So yeah, I started when I was 19, so things were a lot easier. My body sort of did what I wanted it to do, really. And you know, what really started me was I saw a demonstration of Ashtanga by Derek and Radha, and I thought, you know, I just can't do this.
You have that body.
It's just too much hard. But there was a guy there called Satish Kumar, who, I know you probably don't know this, but I think it was in the 50s, he left India with no money, and he literally walked around the world to try and enable countries to be nuclear weapons free. Anyway, he happened to be there at the same time, and he said, give it a try. So I blame him for pushing me to do it. What pretty much keeps me going on the mat is the buzz that I get from it. I just 90% of the time I feel much better for having done it. I don't know how Muggle folk, people who don't practice, cope with life and normal.
Yeah, do you envision yourself? Do you like wonder what you would be like? Because I often have this thought: what would I be like if I didn't practice? You know, how would my thought processes go and things?
Yeah, no, I don't. You know, obviously, as that thought, you know, what would happen if I had to give up for whatever reason? I try not to think about it too much, really, because I'm sure I'd find something else to inspire me to you know, if yoga was banned, you could still fold forwards.
Yeah.
Find some way of doing it. I'd find something that would work.
Hamish, what would you say yoga is? What is your understanding of yoga?
I think you know, that's changed over the years. Really, I've never really got a good definition for it. You know, because you know, you read in the text, you read, you know, yoga is sort of being equanimitous in your mind, yoga is skill in action, yoga is nirodha, stopping your thoughts or the thought process. And then, you read the sort of commentaries on the Yoga Sutra by Vyasa, and he calls yoga viyoga, which is like disunion, separation, as in, moving us away from that, thinking our Purusha is Prakriti. But for me personally, I know yoga is connecting in some way, whether it's connecting to some greater force or just more to humanity. I know that's when I know it works, when I feel more connected, really. So that's what yoga means to me. It means connection.
Well, this is, not to get off topic here, not on the sheet, but
Sure.
This problem bothered me. Just the word yoga implies that there's something to be yoked to. So it already, like what you said, V-yoga implies that there's a division, like there's a goal almost of the goal of yogaing, of yoking yourself. So
yeah, because we often talk, you often hear about that, we're trying to link our soul to God or our body, mind to each other, but it's already there. It's already linked. The body and mind are already connected. So how can you more connect it? But that's all, I suppose just finding that connection.
Yeah. And then we create this goal, maybe just to kind of get rid of all of our obstructions.
Yeah, because and then the goal becomes an obstruction.
Yeah. So do you think moksha or liberation is possible?
Yeah, I do. I think it's possible. I think it's possible for everybody in we all get little glimpses of and that's one of the most beautiful parts of teaching, when you just see like a little smile creeping up on, not a big smile, like not just like, oh, I've managed to stand up from backbends for the first time sort of smile, but just like a thought crosses their head and you go, oh yeah, they've just had like a really nice experience, and to me, what means the difference between moksha and some sort of an imaginary enlightenment stage is that it brings you closer to humanity. It doesn't take you away. That's the major difference to me.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've gotten through a good bit of those. What attracted you to Ashtanga per se? And what?
I'd been doing a bit of other yoga beforehand, just out of books and a couple of classes. I think I really, it was just a revolutionary experience doing that practice. When I first saw in '86, Derek and Rada doing their demonstration and doing their practice, I was like, these guys must smoke so many cigarettes. Their breath is so noisy. And I thought, when I practiced it, I felt like I was flying. It was better than any drugs I'd ever taken. But I thought, it'll never take off. It's way too hard for people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm glad I'm wrong.
Yeah. It's interesting that's sold. I think that yoga and meditation in particular are sold as these relaxing things, and I think they eventually become that. I think that you can get to that, but to get to that state takes like a tremendous
Hard
amount
work.
I find. But they're sold as like this quick fix, like, oh yeah, just relax. And so everybody comes in the door just thinking, oh, it's nap time. Oh,
Yeah.
It'd
be nice if that was the way it worked.
Right.
But yoga's a bit like a relationship with yourself. You got to work on it.
Yeah. Speaking of that relationship, are there poses? I like to think sometimes of the poses as people we like, or and people we don't like. Are there poses that you could think of as your friends, or your least or your
I
favorite?
love Paschimottanasana.
Uh-huh.
That forward bend. Uh, Padangustasana, that first forward bend. Love those. Those two I particularly like. Um,
Have you always liked them, or because sometimes there's poses that I didn't like that I like now? You know what I mean?
I used to hate Baddha Konasana. That was my nemesis. Uh, and then I changed the way I thought about it. I was just like, I'm making it bad and a difficult asana by thinking I don't like it. So I fooled myself into liking it, and it became a lot easier.
Yeah.
Currently, I'm going through some other difficulty with it, but I'm sure if I just change my mind about it, it will become easier again.
Yeah. I read, I think in Yoga Mala, that you have to bring your heels all the way in, and then I found a lot more difficulty with it after I read that. Okay, let's move on to kind of what's going on in current events.
Sure.
What do you think are some ways as Ashtanga teachers and practitioners that we can help facilitate diversity and increasing or decreasing this mostly white sort of conduit of power
Sure.
that's kind of going on?
Okay, so first of all, we're white, middle class, middle-aged guys, so we have a lot of privileges already. So it's difficult to sort of clear up all the sort of things you'd want to clear up with that. But it's all about for yoga schools, yoga studios, making it available, making it access possible, figuring out or more, I suppose, it's removing the obstacles again, removing those obstacles that make it more difficult for people of color, other minority groups, I guess, who may find it difficult to access, either through worry that they might feel not included, or excluded because of price. One of the things we're doing is we've just, and when we're not open yet, but when we reopen, we've changed our sort of payment plan so that it's pay what you like, basically.
Yeah, I heard that. That's very nice.
So, I mean, fingers crossed, it works for us and for everybody else. It's making a big change, and I hope it will. It means that people who would be embarrassed to ask for a discount no longer have to do that.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
So I hope that makes a difference. I don't know what your classes are like. We have, we do have people of color, mostly I would say Asian. London's quite a diverse culture, really, so that's quite good. We're doing a staff training next Saturday. We've got somebody to do an online 1.5 hour Zoom anti-racism, I guess is what you might want to call it, training for all our sort of teachers. So that will hopefully be very good for us, really. I think it's just making whatever steps you can to empower people, really.
Yeah. And then maybe just being like honest and creating a dialogue, like I think is starting to happen, which, is very good.
Yeah, I agree. Talking about it is step one, isn't it?
it's yeah. Where we're at, Hamish, we have 40,000 people, so it's quite a small town. But because of the university, it's way more diverse than any town of that size I've ever been to. Like I've had quite a diverse community here, which I really enjoy and appreciate. Okay, so here's a question I've been thinking of a lot lately, and it's in regards to the comment you've probably heard before, two teachers, death is coming. And lately, lately I've been thinking of this as maybe it's not so much the like two outer teachers, but it's an inner, like listening to your own voice, and then the outer teacher, you know, whatever that is. It could be a myriad of different teachers. And
okay, so yeah,
I know I didn't mean that in the question that I sent you, but
yeah, no, that's very good. No, that's good. That's great. I mean, yes, because originally my understanding was that it was basically two teachers. You'd be confused. You know, one teacher would teach you one thing, and another teacher would teach you something else, which I think is pretty obvious. I think, you know, we've all had students who've been learning from somebody else, and then they come and we have to make a bunch of adjustments, and then it's just confusing for people. So that's the basis behind that. But, you know, we live in the modern world where people travel and learn, and, you know, we don't have that culture anymore of in not just in yoga, in anything, where you just learn from one person. You take your sources from all sorts of different things. So I think as a teacher, I think it's really important that students make their practice their own. You know, so I often see like a student comes in and they practice, and I go, yeah, they've been studying with Richard, or they've been studying with Tim, or, you know, because every teacher has a little particular style that they might add to, you know, their hands or their feet, or whatever it is, the way they particularly do Trikonasana or something, and you go, yeah, and I'm sure people go, oh yeah, they've been studying with Hamish, you know.
Right.
So I like students to be able to explore that, have that variety, and find what works specifically for them. In regards to your inner teacher, which I think is something that, you know, people don't really talk about much, but I think is really important. It's I suppose making sure it's not your ego, or your ego pretending to be your inner teacher, which I'm sure it's very good at, you know. So, you know, it's that sort of balance between self-discipline and, you know, kindness really to yourself. It's finding that balance that's important.
Yeah, if I mean, my problem is if I just listen to my inner teacher, then I want to just crawl back in bed, which is usually not the best thing. And then if I just blindly follow exactly, you know, oh, I'm supposed to do this practice like this exactly to the T, then I get to some poses and I'm like, my back is killing me that day. Then I just try to do it no matter what. Then I'm hurt for a week. So there's that like constant marrying of like what's going on inside and outside of different teachers.
I think that question gets asked at every conference I've ever been. How, in some form or other, how far do I push myself, or not? How much pain is good pain? How much pain is not good pain? And if I had an answer, I would have said by now. But I think everybody's experimenting with that, because everybody's body is slightly different. Every day is slightly different. You have a good day, you have a bad day.
Yeah.
There's no, you can't measure how far you can go with that.
This is kind of a follow-up. How do you view parampara?
Okay, so parampara, it came, obviously it's a word that's been around for a long time. It's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita at the beginning of chapter 4. But for me personally, it never was on my radar for a long time until Sharat started using it. And in the West, we've had something similar in the sort of the concept of guilds. I don't know, Carpenters Guild or
gondolas.
Yes, Gondolas Guild, whatever. And you followed from your teacher, who followed from their teacher. We have lost that concept now. Maybe not so much in music or art. Maybe there's still a bit of that there. I think it's a very valid thing, but obviously you have to be careful that because it comes down to power. The whole it ties in with that whole concept of a guru having power, and we have to, and power is a very difficult thing to handle.
Yeah, I agree.
To be given it or to give it.
Yeah, that I feel like encouraging a dialectic is so important rather than just this, one way stream.
I think it's vital that we learn from our students. I mean, you do anyway,
right?
And I think it's important that students should feel able to question. I certainly try and. I mean, I'm sure I fail on a regular basis, but I try and let my students know that any question they want to ask is totally fine. I don't have it's like, you can't ask me that question. It's I think the openness is really, really, really important. Really,
I appreciate that about you. As someone who's done this for so long, I really. Just from straight away, like I always felt like you were never authoritarian in any way. And in many of the cool texts like the Yoga Vashishta or all of these cool, like this new book that you've got coming out, there's 15, I think you called it.
Yeah.
They're just like questions, and it's like there's no like wall that, Rama, Vashishta can't ask Rama this or vice versa. There's no barrier. There were no questions that were off limits. But sometimes in these times, I feel like there are, and that really sets a tone.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like. It feels like, something's being hidden, and then to me, all relationships are built on trust. Whether that's your partner, whether it's a yoga teacher, yoga student, whether it's the shopkeeper, the bin collectors, you take the bin collectors, your trust is that you trust them, that they will collect your bins. They trust you that you will put the right trash in the right bin and not put food waste in the recycling. That's so everything is built on trust. And when it comes to teaching yoga, it's really important that there is a high level of trust.
Yeah, but it does get, and I have this question there, it does get sometimes confusing because you can't tell a beginner student everything, obviously. Like, I'm not going to teach my mother like the final version of Surya Namaskar, like whatever that means. I'm going to give her what she needs in that moment. So I am like holding this cover over her. So how do you facilitate trust while holding back information?
Yes, that was an interesting question you set there. So the holding back of information, I mean, we do it all the time, Father Christmas as an example. So when I teach, I try not to overload somebody with knowledge, if we're talking about an asana to start with. Or even philosophy, if I had a philosophy talk, I wouldn't overload somebody, you'll forget. So there's that. And also, the best learning comes from self-discovery. It is
Yeah.
self-practice.
Right.
So when somebody goes, that's what he means by mula bandha, I certainly haven't shown them.
Yeah.
It has to come from self-discovery.
Yeah, that's really nice. But then there's, for me, there's the problem of me thinking, oh yeah, I came up with that in the end. Like there's always this, like, I don't know, this grasping to thinking like, oh, I came up with that, which I also want to recognize and just say like, okay, like you have to recognize that a lot of this stuff I've learned from other places, and I'm just kind of like taking it in and processing it.
Yeah. I mean, as teachers, we're just conduits for knowledge, really, in that sense.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think about what do you think about trainings? And do you think that it's like lessening our study? Like, for example, the Yoga Sutra chapter 2 starts off with tapaswadhyaya. So there should be these three sort of things as an approach to yoga in action.
Yeah, the actions of yoga. Yeah.
Right. So do you feel like it's balanced in that way for most practitioners, that we are studying, or should we only worry about asana like the first 30 years?
So because your question was because there's a lack of an official sort of training or intensive thing, which I thought was really a really good question. First of all, what we do is I teach people as sort of assistants, and then they get to learn. They get to spend more time with me. They learn to adjust people. We have lots of conversations. We do some sort of small group workshops, either on philosophy or anatomy or whatever, or this racism thing that we'll be doing soon. The difficulty with trainings, and I suppose this also sort of goes along with one of your other questions, was then their need to be measured. So that, people come in and they're like, well, how far can you bend forwards? How much of the Yoga Sutras have you remembered? How much anatomy do you know? Right. How much of that is important? I don't know. What makes a good yoga teacher? And can you teach that? Is it possible to teach somebody to be a yoga teacher? I mean, obviously there are lots of skills, so how to adjust somebody, how to read the room so that the people in the corners are not getting missed. I like the way, a lot of Ashtanga students, from what I've seen, read and study a lot more yoga texts than other yoga, people who practice another form of yoga. So I think that's really good. So I think people are very motivated to do that. Yes, I would love there to be more official, better quality trainings, but I'm not sure if I'd want to do it. It seemed like a major hassle to run that sort of thing, really. And so I quite like what we have at the moment, that concept of just assistance and working through apprenticeships. That seems to work really well.
Yeah. Do you agree? Often, like Shrat will say, it's important for a teacher to kind of mentally embody what the student is trying to feel like in that moment. Like I totally, since I had an accident, I try to do this more, is I try to think about like what it feels like to get in that pose from their perspective, even though I can't, obviously, but I'm trying to imagine.
100%. 100% is the and that takes time. I mean, it's not even a skill you can teach. You know, it's that, you know, you're seeing a body, you're feeling a body, you feel as if you're inside that person, and I believe there is an actual mental state where that, and it has a name, where you actually feel, where you physically get sensations of what other people feel.
The power,
I don't
right?
get.
It's one of the. Is it one of the powers? One of the like embodied?
No, I'm thinking. You know, it's a psychiatric disorder.
Oh.
You know, like you know, like where people can they can smell colors. That sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Someone said limbic connection.
Yeah.
Is what
That's Susan. Yeah. Okay, yeah. She would know.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I have that, but it is something I feel when I'm working with people, their bodies, and I think it's something that just you either get or you don't get, and it definitely takes time.
Okay, that's interesting. So that brings me to the thought about you called it a psychiatric disorder. And
maybe that's the wrong word.
Well, no, because I wrote this, and you said the question you didn't understand is this fifth one about deconstructing our best self. So, so here's my thinking. Just hear me out.
Okay.
So there's like Master Shantideva and many others say that you have to like wrap your sense of self around others, you know, like to really envelop compassion and even Buddhahood. There's this sense of a lack of self, which is to say that if you're fixated on me, like I need coffee or tea, this is actually tea, or then you're constantly just reifying this self. However, often like Advaita Vedanta and other schools, Vedanta schools will teach that you want to like become your best self, as though there's this thing out there. And so when you're like deconstructing that self on the mat, whether it's through like you said, like you couldn't touch your toes when you first started, and like before that point you thought your best self was someone that maybe didn't have that idea of being able to touch their toes, you know, or as a need for that. So I guess what I'm asking is, like, we want to expand this sense of self in some way. We want to like incorporate the other and become like, if they cut their arm or something accidentally, we want to almost feel it like it's our own, you know, or they had an accident and they're struggling through Lotus.
Okay.
So,
okay, so
what is more important? Do we try to deconstruct our self, or do we try to become our best self and reify?
Okay, yeah. Okay, now I understand the question. Okay, so it revolves around the concept of I and ego and ahamkara, asmita, those sort of things. So it's important that we don't confuse Indian thought with sort of Western thought as well. Here's my understanding is, so egoism is called asmita in Sanskrit, and the opposite of asmita is smita, and smita means to smile, which I always think is a really nice little aside. Part of our problem is our sense of self, our ego, our I-ness. And so I often say, if we take I out of the equation, our relationships with other people, which is mostly what life is about in lots of ways, or with anything, if we take I out of the equation, we gain more of that connection.
Mm-hmm.
So that's important. If we look at it from a sort of a concept of what the ego does, as in the ahamkara, the I maker, that gives us a sense of self. Okay, and so people whose sense of self is low, you may say like a low sense of self-esteem, would then try and find other things to fulfill that hole. So we often have fill our days with useless things because we feel we're incomplete. Yeah. There's something missing. When actually, a yogi has everything they need, and what that whole needs to make it whole with a W is just love, really. And it's not love from somebody else, because that's like, trying to find a partner who always agrees with you. It's never going to happen. It's got to be like just sort of coming, not even self-love, it's because we're still trying to take the self out. It's just a feeling of love. So, it's like you start off your practice with Surya Namaskar, your head is full of thoughts, you get to Padmasana at the end, and it's just a sort of a nice feeling of love. And that's what we fill our hole with. Yeah.
It seems to be a giving rather than a taking, maybe.
Yeah. So it's two answers to two questions, really.
I like that, and that's kind of a theme that's been kicking around through this series with Richard and Mary and others. Seems to be. Speaking of,
it's the ahamkara and the asmita are two different things.
Right, and Lakshmi said something really nice. He said, like the ahamkara is with it's like where you don't know you're supposed to do it, and then like something that you just sorry, yes, asmita is you just don't know any better, whereas ahamkara is like that you're not supposed to do it, but you do it anyway. Like that's the ego he just differentiated between.
Yeah. Because there's Duryodhana in the Mahabharata. So Duryodhana says, at one point he says, I know what is right action and what is wrong action, but I can't do it. I am compelled to do wrong action. He says it's because of the gunas. So that I find is an interesting concept, is that do we have agency, or is it just the gunas are manifesting their way through ourselves?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer.
I guess we're not the doers, right?
Yeah, it's Krishna acting through us.
That doesn't sound very good. Yeah, we'll shelve that for now. Speaking though of love, did your practice change and your teaching change whenever you had your daughter at all?
My practice is constantly evolving. I've been fortunate in having a wonderful wife and a pretty wonderful daughter as well, who've allowed me to continue practicing, really. So I've been practicing for like 34 years now, I think. And, obviously moon days and Saturdays take off. I think I've missed 8 days outside of that.
Wow.
So
intentionally, or you just like missed a plane or something?
Intentionally, because I was either traveling or 3 days because my daughter was being born. Yeah. So she owes me loads. So my practice has only changed with injuries and age, really, in that sense, and my sort of emotional understanding. my teaching, I hope, has improved, but I haven't. I think I've probably slowed down a bit. I used to be able to run around a lot and jump over people and things like that. So I've probably slowed down a bit, which has probably been quite good in that I'm more. I give people more depth to my adjustments, to my thoughts with them. But the way I teach now is remained the same.
Yeah. It seems that initially I thought that, just having, a decade of practice under my belt was enough, but I now realize that, that it takes a lot of time for me to start to see. And so I really value people that have been teaching a long time, like yourself, because I kind of am starting to see that there's so much that I'm not seeing with each student that comes in, and how to give them a skillful way to come to the practice, and just soak it in. There's
it takes time.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of that's the great thing of learning, where we're constantly learning. I think that's really, really nice. And it's interesting you mentioned the 10 years, because most teacher trainings of whatever, it's like 3 years minimum. And I'm like, 3 years? I was just I was still in nappies, relatively speaking.
Well, they have them even now for 3 months. You can get certified in 3 months. So
no, but you've had to have been practicing for 3 years before. I don't know what it's like in America, but yeah, here it's normally 2 to 3 years. You have to have done practice. But what does that mean? It's 1 day a week, So yeah, I think the longer it is before people start teaching, the better, I think.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you this. I hope that it doesn't offend you, but a couple of weeks ago, during your conference, if you would teach online, and you said, no, I'm not going to do it. And I at the time, I really admire that, because for me, it's really difficult to hear the breath, and I totally agreed with you. But then I thought, while I was teaching the next day, or trying to observe, that someone asked this follow-up question about well, have you ever taught a blind person? And you said, yeah. And so if one of our senses as a teacher are encumbered or severed or, limited, like they are when we're teaching in an online format, does that require that we just stop teaching?
And that's a good question. I was walking today, and I thought about that, and I remember that blind person. So when I taught the blind person, I was next to them and moving their body. Mm-hmm. So I obviously could talk them through stuff, but actually connecting their fingers to their big toe, all those sort of things, I think made a big difference, really. So when we're on Zoom, which I think we're all, catching up with really quickly, my first limited use of it, I realized that I couldn't see, I can only see a small, people have shown me videos of, here's me doing Kapotasana. I could, like you say, you can't hear them breathe. You can see one part of them, and it's just a snapshot of their day. I have no idea. I haven't met them at the door, seen that they've come in, they've split up with their boyfriend, or they've just got a new job, whatever it is. So it's very different for me. That it's not one sense that I'm losing. And for me, I seem, I could almost do without my eyes to teach, really. Obviously I use my eyes a lot, but the sense of hearing people breath and touching body is really, really important to me.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because I too feel and am conflicted, because I feel that, this saying yoga is about what you can't see, and the sutras say kind of a similar thing. It's about the subtle, and not about, in these times it's really become like such a visually oriented thing, which is not what I feel like yoga is.
Yeah.
And yet we use that visual format to contextualize and add scientific measures to everything. And to me, I just don't value that, like you say, cutting and pasting, like editing out all of the other important details are so important. And yet, I'm trying to do my best for my students.
I mean, I have, it's been 3 months now, and I'm like, maybe I should. I mean, I want to support my students as best I can, but it feels very voyeuristic to be in somebody's room and just watch them practice.
Yeah. But here you are in my room with and we can, I still think that we can learn from each other, and it's like a new avenue of learning, I think.
I mean, I think our plan long term, and this is part of your questions, I think, is that obviously we'll get back into teaching at the Shala, and gradually we'll be able to increase our numbers, we hope. I think we'll probably keep some of our online classes that not me personally, but Louise or Tom and Lauren have been doing, because I think what's been really useful for those people is that they don't live in London. They live in some small village somewhere. They don't have a teacher, and they're isolated, emotionally, physically, geographically, whatever way you want to call it. And I think the community of yoga students is really, really important. And I'm always amazed and incredibly honored to be part of the Ashtanga yoga community. I think the Ashtanga yoga community is one of the strongest yoga communities I've ever seen. You could
nice you say
be
that.
Anywhere and there's people there. It's lovely. It's so nice.
Yeah. So what do you suggest to do for students to stay inspired, since they're at home without a teacher, and now they're finally having to really dig into their own sadhana alone?
I've been emailing a few people. People have been emailing me. I think connecting with students, one-to-one is really important. I think, if students want to connect with a teacher, I think that should be really encouraged, really. It's and doing these video conferences, I think that's really important. There's obviously whatever inspires you. There's in the Hatha Yoga Padaparika, it says, you shouldn't, talking about wearing the clothes of a yogi doesn't make you a yogi. And I remember having a conversation with Richard Freeman about that particular sentence. And we were, the whole idea of sort of branded yoga clothes is massive, really, I suppose. And I said, but, if you've got your new whatever t-shirt or hot yoga leggings that you're really spent loads of money on, if it makes you have a good practice, if it makes you feel good about something, then that works. So whatever inspires you. If you need to go on YouTube and watch loads of people doing yoga, if that inspires you whatever inspires you to get on the mat, that's the important thing. Because I think somebody said, I can't remember who it was, said the only bad practice you do is the one you don't do.
Right.
So whatever it is, even if it's just standing on the mat, there's a funny story I like to tell about Shamila used to be one of my assistants years ago. And this guy comes into class and he said, oh, can I practice? And he was dropping in. And I said, yeah, sure, here's a mat. Just put your mat down there. And he was, yeah, great. He says, but I only do short form. And we were like, what's short form? What's, just start. And, if we've got anything we need to help you with, we'll let you know. So he raises his hands. And then he lies down. We were like, whoa, that is really short form.
That's great, yeah. He got the gist of it.
So yeah, whatever gets you on the mat, that's my inspiration, really.
Yeah, it was like expansion, contraction. I'm done.
Yeah. That's what it is. If it's one good breath, it's quality over quantity.
Yeah, I often say that's my goal. Sometimes people ask which pose I'm doing, and I'll say Surya Namaskara, and I say that my goal is to be able to perfect it. To just like almost like a Zen way, where you're just like you kind of have perfected this one thing, and that's all because you did it so well. That's all you needed to do.
Isn't that like the martial art thing? I don't fear the person who knows 1,000 kicks. I fear the person who knows one kick and who's practiced it 1,000 times.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Someone asked to contrast yoga shala versus a studio.
Okay. So shala means room or hall or place, Sanskrit word. And, ours is called Dharma shala because of the concept of resting places for people on spiritual journeys. And it was a concept set up by Ashoka, who was like some ancient emperor in India. And you still find shalas, Dharma shalas all over India. So, I suppose the difference is, for me, is that, it's the whole spiritual experience in a shala. Whereas a yoga studio, you may not get that. But I'm pretty supportive of pretty much any yoga and any yoga studio because squabbling over differences of like our yoga's better than your yoga or our shala's better than your studio, it's pointless. We're all in this together. I'm a great fan of bringing people together. The more diverse, the better. We tried years ago to get I don't know what you call it. You have yoga conferences in America. We don't have them here in Britain.
Okay.
And I tried to get one together with a bunch of friends from different yoga styles. And it nearly happened, but people have egos. We want to do this. No, we want to do that. So it was. It's still in the back of my mind that I would like, and the idea was that it would bring people from different yoga traditions together, not to so Ashtanga people could practice Iyengar yoga, is that they could go, oh, you're a human being as well. I can talk to you. Yeah. That sort of thing. We've all got something to learn from each other. So that's maybe it'll happen one day.
Yeah, we hope. I used to enjoy just studying, going to other schools just for fun, like Shivananda or just different schools and learn like how they do things. Okay, well, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your. You seem to be writing a little bit more now, and I've really enjoyed. I just wanted to mention Hamish gave me this book. Everybody should get it. One thing I like about Hamish's model is he tries to be very succinct, and it's also very humorous, I find. So I really recommend this for many students out there. If you don't have this, you can pick up a copy from his website. And he also is doing this periodical, I think it's with Jenny, is it?
Jenny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they've been running this one called Pushpam. So can you tell us a little bit about that and any other books that you might have coming out?
So the yellow book, Yoga Dharma, was something I wanted for myself. You know, I take train journeys. You want to pack something you can, I don't like looking at my phone. I wanted to pack a book that I could read that would give me a bit about yoga. There's hundreds of yoga books out there. So it needed to be small, so it'd fit in my bag or wherever. But most of the yoga books you found were on one subject, the Yoga Sutras or the Bhagavad Gita or the Hatha Yoga Padaprika. It was very difficult to find one that had the breadth.
Yeah.
So that was part of the inspiration behind it. And also I wanted all my assistants to have the sort of knowledge that's already in there. I also, the third thing I wanted it to be, I have quite a few students who English is a second language. So for me, it was important that the language was easy to understand. There was no big, long words.
Right.
The sentences were relatively short. I believe some people have improved their English from reading it. That's what I've been told anyway. So that was that. The hardest part was my mum was the editor. I mean, we still love each other, but it was difficult.
That was probably fun.
People have been asking, I see in the chats, where you can get it from. We have a website called pushpam.co.uk. It's already up there.
Yeah,
and that's that. The magazines, Pushpam magazine. So Jenny is our editor, and Matt and Emma do the design, and there's an amazing team. Originally, it was going to be something that was like about 12, 15, 20 pages long, just a few basic articles. It would just circulate within our London Shala. And they were like, nah, it's going to be like 60 pages. It's going to be big, mate. We're like, okay. And so it has taken off, really. I'm really proud about it. I did really quite badly at school. All my own fault, I'm sure. So it's amazing that it's taken off, and it's been a total joy to share the knowledge. The main thing that has inspired us, or so I suppose the main rule we have with Pushpam is that people should, when people read it, they shouldn't feel angry. You know, you often read a newspaper or an article and you're like, that's so wrong, or that person is a complete whatever. And to me, that I didn't want that. I wanted people to feel, okay, I've learned something, and maybe it's made me inquire about myself a bit more, but I don't, you know, it has to come with love as well attached to it. So there's that. I'm working on two books. I'm working on one book which is taking a bit more time than I thought, and that's called Be a Yogi. And that was in relationship to some of my students going, you know what, we've read Yoga Dharma, but we still don't get it. And how does it relate to modern life and our own yoga practice?
Yeah.
So I realized Yoga Dharma is just covers basic philosophy, but how do you put that into 2020 or whenever the book comes out, 2021. So that's that one. And also I realized that people didn't always learn from reading, pages in a book. So it needed to cover in other ways. So I'm using some infographics to explain things. Yeah. So an example of an infographic, if I can sort of explain it, would be, if you wait 1 second, I may even have one.
Yeah.
So yeah, so here's an infographic that I've just been drawn out. Okay, so it's about Indian philosophy.
Right.
So the whole thing is Indian philosophy, but as you can see, you've got Samkhya and Buddhism, and then you've got yoga. So yoga is just a part of Indian philosophy, and it takes a bit from Samkhya, it takes a bit from Buddhism, and it takes a bit from Vedanta. So when people ask, what's yoga philosophy, it's very difficult to say what it's this, because it takes from other parts of philosophy. Mm-hmm. So in the book, Be a Yogi, it's going to use lots of infographics and pictures, some cartoon work, just to sort of make the whole learning experience better and different. I'm hoping to print on, I think, pink paper, because I've been told that works for people who suffer from dyslexia, that it makes it easier for them to understand. So we're going to try and, make it better. So that's that. And then the one I'm working on at the moment, and we've had the final PDFs, and so they're just going to, Emma and Matt are about to send that off to the printers, and this is just a mock-up. It's called 15, and it's about the 15 questions that Arjuna asks Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna's responses. So obviously Arjuna asks, let's see, let me find a question that, so the one of the classic questions that Arjuna asks is, what are the signs of someone who has reached a state of steady wisdom? How do they speak? How do they sit? How do they walk? It's from chapter 2, number 54, classic question, how do you spot somebody who's enlightened? How do you spot somebody who's got there, The reply that Krishna gives is, another sort of 17 or 18 verses long. I haven't included all those verses, so I've compressed them all and put, one of steady wisdom has no desires and is beyond happiness and sadness. So I've just compressed those into one answer. So that's how that works. It also includes a few direct quotes from the Yoga Sutra, from the Bhagavad Gita, as an introduction to explain the Bhagavad Gita, and names of Arjuna, names of Krishna, because he has lots of different names: Gopala, Govinda, Krishikesha, Madhava. A glossary, everything's in 15, and then there's little bits of artwork somewhere. Little Hanuman holding a flag.
Oh, that's amazing.
So one of the interesting things I always love about the Bhagavad Gita, people think the Bhagavad Gita is, there's Krishna and Arjuna, but actually there's Hanuman as well, because Hanuman is sitting on top of the flagpole listening to the whole conversation, so everybody gets to hear about it, really.
Well, we look forward to it. I think it's going to be a really great and certainly we'll get one. Right now, we're going to go ahead and open up the chat room. And for those of you who are interested in asking questions, we can do it in one of two ways. If you want to turn your camera on, that probably is best not to happen because we're recording and we're going to try to post these. So just leave your camera off, but you can write in the chat box and I'll go through those and just parse out any questions you might have for Hamish. So someone asked Hamish if the 1 and 2 from Pushpam will ever be back in stock.
Okay, yeah. So we're, it's one of those things when you want to know is like, how much do you publish? So 1 and 2 we did 1,200 of each. I was quite nervous to know whether it would sell. In fact, issue 1, the cover is made of wood, and so everybody's cover is slightly different.
Oh.
And that makes it incredibly difficult to get that again. We were just very fortunate in getting that particular stock of wood, of paper, wood, whatever. And I also, it was also, for me, it was just like, at some point there has to be an end. Something has to finish. Number 2, again, we have a lot of requests for number 2.
Because you had the origami section in it.
Yeah, I know.
The one with the seed packets also?
Seed packet? Did you get a seed packet?
I remember having a seed packet in one of them. Yeah.
I think that was in the latest one, so in issue 4.
Oh, right.
So that was a piece of card with seeds like embedded in it, and a quote from the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, we like to sort of have little funky things. I think we basically need 500 people and to know that we can to print it off. So if we knew 500 people wanted issue 1 and issue 2, we'd definitely print it off. But we over-ordered with issue 3, so we've still got a lot of those to get through. But that's not big. That's not a big deal. We'll get there, and hopefully, maybe we'll bring out a special edition or something.
Someone asked, Hamish, when do you start?
I start teaching people pranayama once they've finished intermediate series. I've met people who've learned earlier, and I've found it destabilizes them mentally or emotionally. So I think it's really important to do when people are sort of ready for it. And also I find that people who learn pranayama, not everybody then goes on to keep practicing it. So it's like, oh, we all want to learn pranayama. Of course we do, because it is amazing. It's an amazing practice. But it's like anything, you've got to keep doing it. It's not one that's like, oh, I'll just do it on Sundays.
Yeah, I find it hard to balance that with my working schedule.
Yeah.
Like when I'm in India, oh yeah, totally easy to keep a regular pranayama practice. I can do it.
I do it before my asana practice.
Yeah, I find it's easier to do it before, even though I'm supposed to do it after. But yeah. Okay, we have one more question probably we can get to. When you finally stand up from a drop back and can do it, when do you stop spending your whole practice wondering if you're going to be able to do it that
day? It will come and go. It will come and go. You'll get it's like a lot of other asanas. You'll be like totally focused on I'm thinking about Baddha Konasana and how much I hated it, and it's going to come, it's coming soon, that horrible posture, and it's in your head all the time. And then at some point you overcome that difficulty, and then you're no longer thinking about it, and then it's some other asana.
Yeah. there's always one there.
There's always an asana that will, which is good. That's the whole reason why the asana is difficult, is to have that challenge really.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's so nice to have you, Hamish. And
that's brilliant. It's lovely to see you and chat to everybody.
Yeah, and I hope that we can do this maybe another time. My
Sure.
thinking is eventually we might do this next year or something. So we'd love to have you back on and chat. Or
anniversary coronavirus chat.
Yeah, hopefully without the virus.
Like a second wave.
No, not that kind of wave. Anyways, thank you very much, and I hope to see you again. It's always lovely.
Thank you to everybody else for listening and staying on. That was wonderful.
Yeah, so beautiful to have everyone here in these times and to share in this community. So I am very, very grateful for that.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Lindsay, take it away.
Stay well.
All right. Well, thank you, Hamish, so much. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I want to remind everybody that we are taking donations or recommending donations for directrelief.org, and certainly welcome any donations you might want to give to the Contemplative Sciences Center. Visit our website, check out the programs that we offer. And we hope that you will join us next week for our conversation with Luke Jordan. Thanks so much.